All right. Welcome to the show. A special day here on my channel. Since Docker's in the name of it, I figure we've got to talk about the latest Docker news. That's going to be all we cover today. So if you're here thinking you're going to get help with your Docker run commands, probably not the day to hang out and ask in Q&A. We've got a ton of information to talk about, multiple press releases, and I pulled all the strings, got a bunch of friends in the room. So let's just get straight to it because I'm sure you want to talk about the headlines. So we'll go around the room. Everybody, starting with Jeff, just introduce yourself and tell us where you're from and why you're here.
My name is Jeff Nickoloff. I've been blogging and writing and using Docker since mid-2013. I spent time at Amazon. I was at Amazon when I discovered Docker. I'm here today because it's still a really important project to me every day. And I like participating in the scuttlebutt as much as the next person.
Nice. Scuttlebutt, I like it. Sailor terms. Mike.
All right, I'm Michael Irwin. I'm a, frequent flyer here on the show, so glad to be back as well. For those of you who don't know me, I'm at Virginia Tech. I'm an applications architect and a little bit developer as well. Been playing with Docker for about 4 years now, and been playing with a Docker app and a lot of the kind of cutting edge stuff and figuring out how we can better our development workflows and process and that kind of stuff, which makes me excited for the announcement, but won't jump into it too much yet. But happy to be here.
All right, and Nirmal's last.
All right, not least, right?
Not least, I'm least. You're last.
I'm Nirmal Mehta. I'm a chief technologist at Booz Allen Hamilton. I'm in very sunny Durham, North Carolina. And I've been a user of Docker's technology from a very early stage, and just love interacting with the community. And I've been on your show a couple times now, Bret, and this is going to be an interesting one for sure.
Yes, and in case you didn't, so all three of these gentlemen have been on the show before. You can look through the archives and just search their names or their Twitter handles. You'll probably find it. And the way this is arriving at a perfect intersection, and I didn't get the chance to put the Docker logo in the middle, but I wanted to put, like, between the quad of us, I wanted to have some sort of logo because we all have a different relationship a little bit to Docker. We're all captains, but we come from different backgrounds. I tend to come from like the solo DevOps or the small team DevOps. I mean, I'm just going to speak for everyone else. I feel like Jeff is coming from the cloud focus, having that AWS background and dealing with cloud-focused projects. Mike's coming from the EDU background, working in university, and Nirmal's working on like the big biz background, working with the big consulting companies. So I feel like between the four of us, we probably have at least 4 opinions on these things. So
it's gonna be fun.
Yeah. So let's go with what we know, and of course, everybody, throw your questions in the chat about all the news topics. We'll get to them eventually. But let's just go through what we know. I'm going to list off a couple of things, and then if anyone else wants to throw in other stuff they know about. So what we know from the press releases, there's one on both Docker's website that I'll just throw up here real quick. Docker's website has a press release. Mirantis, who is the company buying part of Docker's tooling and people, is got their own press release, and then each CEO put out their own blog post, and each one of those has little nuggets of information that I think is key to dissect, but we're not going to wear ourselves out on 30 minutes of trying to go through all these different stuff. So the big things for me were Docker sold its enterprise products to Mirantis. So to me, that's everything closed sourced. And essentially what's left is all the people focused on developer open source tooling. And then Docker Hub, which is kind of in the middle there.
That's what I was going to say. The services component of it, I didn't get any impression that the services were going anywhere.
So what does that mean to you when you say services?
Well, I mean, so I don't even remember when it was, like 2015 or 2016, when Docker acquired Docker Cloud, and obviously Docker Hub. These were the two biggest value. Well, Docker Hub definitely was probably the largest value add that Docker brought to the entire community. I mean, a lot of people will, like, when they're minimizing Docker, they're like, Docker just like took something we've been doing for a long time, and then they added packaging. And it's like, yeah, but that was a big deal for a lot of people.
Right.
And even when you look at it today, like even the people who don't want to depend on like Docker Hub, they end up doing so. It is pervasive. And like basically the way that I read the whole thing was like, hey, we were going to market with like 6 different business models. We tried one and in enterprise software, and it's like, it's not something that they sold it. I just don't think that they were hitting their growth targets. And so like get some value out of it, shed it, let somebody else build it, who that is their entire business model, who they can focus on it and, focus on other ways to bring value to the market. So.
Anyone else?
I don't know.
No, that's good. That's good.
I tend to agree with that sentiment. It's a little the kind of concern there is, they've spent a lot of energy on the enterprise products as the primary business model, and for the part of Docker that's not going to Mirantis, I wonder if that's going to affect their future business models and what we're going to expect or what we're going to see out of their new refocused on developer tooling, whatever that means right now.
Right. Yeah. So if we talk about, and if we try to take this thing and break it up into topics, to me, the first topic that we can just get out of the way, because I think a lot of us want to talk about the future of Docker and like where's this going and what's that mean developer tooling, and taking ourselves back 5 years to remember the original pre-cluster orchestration Docker when that was not the focus. But so if we take the deal and what we know about Mirantis being they were I guess, because I had not heard of them before yesterday, and they were largely in the not OpenShift, but
OpenStack.
OpenStack, yeah. They were originally OpenStack. I guess they moved to OpenShift, and so now they're like trying to be the Kubernetes company, like a lot of these other companies. And this, to me, it essentially doubles their employees and triples their customers. So we assume that there was something in the back, something behind these companies, that they traded stock or, private stock or money, or someone went and got VC money. Who knows how that all worked out? That's not public. They're not sharing that. And of course, we don't get any access to that. We're just engineers. So what we know is that I'm going to guess there was around 450 employees at Docker, and it seems like 300 of those are going to be leaving and become Mirantis employees. So if you're an enterprise customer, they have an FAQ that really talks through it. And basically the answers are, you're going to be working with the same people. It's the same product. It's the same people, just a different paycheck. And eventually we're hearing from the Mirantis press release that they'll be merging their stuff together to create one cohesive strategy around multiple products, which is kind of, to me, like what VMware did with, like Pivotal had their Kubernetes and VMware had their Kubernetes, and it sounds like they're trying to bring that stuff together, at least. Everybody's buying everybody in the Kubernetes space right now, so I guess this is just another one of those things.
It's an era of consolidation for sure.
Yeah. What's kind of disappointing on that side is that Kubernetes shouldn't be the only, like, there's still space for innovation in the orchestration space, I think.
Wait, what?
That is that is like one of the most political statements I've heard. You're going to go start kissing babies soon.
Heresy.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a lot of pain with Kubernetes, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
Right, and I think, and my feeling, like, the market right now is all about trying to figure out how to reduce that pain, whatever people's perception of the pain is, without reinventing the wheel. Right. I think like K3S is probably the closest to trying to reinvent, but they're not touching the app workflow. They're just touching the infrastructure, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a consolidation play. Like, I mean, when your business model is around like enterprise sales, like you have with your VMwares and your Pivotals and all that kind of stuff, like really the only way to actually grow is to absorb the other businesses. Right. I mean, we see that with the IBMs and the Red Hats, like that. You're not going to suddenly discover a different set of the global 10,000. Like that's
right.
just you're not going to like, that's just not real. And moving down the market into larger markets, but smaller dollar figures, then it's just a totally different business.
Yeah.
And so. Like but that sector is already so well covered by managed cloud products that what's the value add? How are you going to justify the additional cost? So I think it's like overall, I think strategically for both companies it makes a lot of sense. I hadn't heard of the company that acquired them either, but clearly they've got a solid. I'm just not in that market, so why would I have, right?
Yeah.
And so. They went out and I think they made a really smart purchase. Like there are a lot of Docker Enterprise customers, and like they built their sales org built a real customer base. And at the end of the day, it was not. I just don't think it's gonna like that business model was, and it feels like they agree like that business model is not one that Docker's investors need to justify their growth ambition.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's interesting that their PR says the press release from Mirantis says 1/3. So, we don't know numbers from all the different companies in the Kubernetes space about what customers they're getting necessarily. Like everybody will put a couple of key big ones, but we don't really know information like what they put in there. 1/3 of the Fortune 100 and 1/5 of Global 500 use Docker Enterprise. So that's a pretty big number to me, considering that they're competing with the likes of VMware and Red Hat, and those companies make billions of dollars a year.
Yeah, but they're not actually competing. Not until recently were they actually competing, because VMware was an infrastructure play, not an orchestration play.
It wasn't that long ago.
I mean, coming from a background of supporting large organizations, most large organizations and companies use everything. In some, like there's a difference between saying that the Fortune 150 companies have Docker EE and saying that 80% of their business of 150 Fortune 500 companies are running on Docker EE, right? Like those are two separate things. So it could be someone running Docker EE in a lab somewhere, or it could be supporting their core business. It's very hard to tell these days, and everyone's goal is to muddy the waters to make sure that no one really realizes that the customer base is probably a lot smaller than everyone wants to admit. With respect to moving to the cloud and moving to these new types of distributed application architectures, to be frank.
Yeah,
I thought that the price was really interesting, though. What was it, like 30? What was it? They got a cash injection of something like 33 million or something like that.
35, yeah, 35.
35. You can infer all sorts of interesting things from that price.
To me, it's like a reboot. Like this is the cash infusion to restart Docker as a back again to the OG, developer tooling company.
I would hope so. I think we're all hoping that.
It's the rebirthday. So.
I mean, I'm not one of those business people that reads into the numbers and studies Crunchbase and all that stuff, but I was just feeling like that number meant that money was going to Docker to fund the company while it comes up with some new revenue streams, and then whatever deal was done in the background was for the investors of the original company or something. But we have no evidence of that. But obviously that stuff didn't move to a new company for free. So one might think, okay, well, why does Docker need more cash if they just sold a whole bunch of their stuff? And I don't know. I'm guessing, but you can wonder what 35. Yeah, more cash is better. But so one thing that's not really been talked about, and those of us close to Docker yesterday were talking with all of our friends in Docker, and one of the things that's not really talked about is the fact that unlike selling the product away or selling a company whole, they're splitting the company, and that means splitting the employees. And it's like Jenny told me, they're breaking up a family, and that has got to be a hard part for like 450 people today, dealing with the fact that the people they worked around every day may not be working with them anymore.
Yeah, and I hope they don't lose. We know, like, going through that, you're going to lose a lot of momentum. You're going to lose a lot of energy, a lot of good faith, in terms of goodwill, I guess you could say. I hope there's a quick recovery around this, and that, core folks are in the right place for their own careers, for their own goals, and for their own success. And I think as captains, all of us wish everyone the best on their future endeavors, whether they stay at Docker Inc., Mirantis, or go somewhere else. I think the community around Docker and the interaction between the community and its employees is one of the core strengths of Docker Inc. Overall, and I hope that magic isn't lost. And I think that's where the next couple of weeks is going to be the toughest, is trying to see where that is, where that all settles in the next couple of weeks.
And I totally agree. It got a little sad there for a second there, Nirm, but yeah, I totally agree. And it'll be interesting to see how things split. And I don't know much about Mirantis. Are they going to have to relocate people? Are they able to stay where they are? Are people going to still be able to rub shoulders, down at the bar, whatever? I'm not sure what this change in companies really is going to mean. So
I don't know. Not to downplay the sad stuff, because any kind of unexpected change is always disruptive. But they're from a fulfillment from your job perspective. It's like, if you were on the enterprise product and now you're going with enterprise, you're going to be able to focus, right? Like, there's not going to be you're going to get rid of all the internal tension where people are talking about, well, we're trying to compete against ourselves. We're selling a product that competes with our open source product. Like, that just goes away, right? There's no more, well, we've got these 15 different assets that we're not able to invest into any one with any vigor, right? And so I think that there's going to be, and it's not like anybody's going away. You might move to a different building, right? But at the end of the day, the products are intrinsically linked. If you had interactions with a person who is fulfilling a role, you still have a dependency on that team, right? And so it's a small community anyway. And realistically, over the last 3 years, I feel like there's been so much rotating personnel there kind of anyway, where a lot of the early people that I developed relationships are gone. There's only really a handful of people that I have any kind of real relationship with still at Docker. And so, it's good. Now I feel like I've got really good relationships with people that are at Microsoft, who are at GitHub, who are at Google, who are still at Docker, who are at a lot of other little companies. And so it's kind of watching this great little team that builds something that I've always been really excited about, kind of mature and flourish and kind of go out into the world and build a bigger, tighter community. So I think it's more of an opportunity than anything.
Yeah.
I like optimism.
Yeah. I think a lot of us feel that way, right? Like that. So all of us here, maybe not Mike, but I still consider him in the same theme, that a lot of us got involved with the community, started running meetups and stuff before Docker Enterprise. And then Docker Enterprise was a product that was there to basically create the revenue stream they needed to, make a viable company. And but it wasn't one of their, even first 5 projects, right? For at least 2 or 3 years, they were just creating open source tools. And I think the only thing you could pay for was Hub, and then eventually Cloud. And then Yeah, and then store, and then they created
Pseudo.
Docker Data Center, which is now Docker Enterprise.
The first thing you could pay for is DTR and
Yeah.
cloud.
Oh,
I mean,
so
I think
DTR was
most-
before cloud took payment? I didn't, yeah.
Well, it's around the same time.
Okay.
I mean, I think most of them, most of their big projects were early acquisitions too. I mean, Google Cloud was to them.
Yep.
Even I believe. I mean, correct me. I wasn't on the team. I don't really know the details, but I think even like the early version of the first revision of Docker Enterprise, like the GUI was an acquisition. I don't remember the company that produced the tech initially, but I mean they did a lot of
Shipyard,
built. Yeah, it was Shipyard, that building.
We've got some very quick commenters. So I've been watching the stream, and they're filling in the gaps for us.
Yeah, no, I have no doubt.
So I want to pick up on one thread there that you kind of called out, which is it's an opportunity to focus both on Mirantis' side and allowing the Docker EE team to really focus on whatever products are going to come out of this acquisition. And it's also a really optimistic thing for Docker Inc. to now focus more on the developer user experience side, which I'm going to speak from my own spot, is there's still a lot of white space left in making the developer local development and the developer ecosystem tooling. The user experience has a lot of space to improve. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there, especially from a company that and an open source community that has strived to keep design and user experience as a first-class citizen in all the decision making they've done in the last 5 years now. So that I think does represent a huge opportunity. And if this kind of split allows the engineers working on the open source tooling and the new tooling that's going to come out at some point to really double down on that user experience, that's a great opportunity and can be really re-energizing for the community as well.
Yeah,
I totally agree. One of the areas I'm kind of interested to see play out a little bit is Docker Desktop. Okay, back up just a little bit. I've been noticing over the last even just 2 years that I teach a lot of 101s and getting started with Docker, and the audience has shifted dramatically over that time period, where it's not so much of a, hey, I want to spend time in the CLI and understand the nuts and bolts and how everything's working, to how do I use this? And we started seeing Docker start to recognize it as well. And so the Docker Desktop Enterprise Edition had the project templates and kind of GUI and application designer and all this kind of stuff that made it a lot more approachable to many audiences. But recognizing that was part of the Enterprise Edition, closed source and everything, I'm wondering if that's going to make its way back into the, because that's really the developer workflows. Is that going to make it back into the open source or a paid version for it or something like that? Because with the shifting audience, we're going to have to probably see more of the kind of GUI based approach and that kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see that play out a little bit.
Well, I have like a deep skepticism around that.
Sure.
I mean, like I don't know. Like you can certainly say, okay, if we're not going to focus on enterprise sales, right? Like our customer has shifted from the global 10,000 to, 50 million potential developers or something like that. It's a gross overstatement, but like some very large market with smaller spends. Then like you're going to have to change some stuff because developers don't pay for anything. Like that there's a really like I mean, we're getting better about it, but like paying for dev tools always seems weird to me, especially as an individual. If my company's paying for it, then whatever. But I mean, if you look at if you look at like the Microsofts of the world, I mean, that's been their bread and butter forever. And I mean, VS Code is free, right? I mean, like I really don't know how you monetize that. So if I am strategizing at Docker, I'm thinking to myself, well, we just sold off our main revenue stream. So whatever we focus on next has got to be something that we can monetize and relatively quickly. If I'm them, I'm focusing way more on services. I'm doubling down on Hub. Like I was making suggestions in 2018. The biggest surprise to me for Docker over the last 5 years has been the underinvestment in Hub. I mean, the fact that, I mean, in Docker Hub, they had the missing artifact repository for the world. Like they gave us a global place where we can't get off it even if we wanted to. And as far as I'm concerned, all of the alternatives that are not like running a private Artifactory instance or whatever are really, really bad. I mean, they're tragic. And so like, I mean, I was even talking at the end of last year with some VP or something like that at Docker. I was like, look, GitHub just announced GitHub Actions. If you want to bring dev tools, bring CI automation with real artifact repositories, with real artifact management. Don't give us this, like, GitHub is great, they're close to the source, but like, give me automation. The best thing you ever did for me was give me auto builds in Docker Hub. And like, why did that stop? You can monetize that all day. It's a value add service. You can basically just you're reselling infrastructure that you're sourcing out of AWS anyway. And it like focusing on that would bring you closer to customer, which are they're running service software anyway. So it's like if you understand it better, you'll be able to sell it to them better by being one.
Yeah. Well, so what we do know on that topic, I'm just going to quote Docker. Docker is ushering in a new era with a return to our roots by focusing on advanced developer workflows when building, sharing, and running modern applications. Moving forward, we'll expand on Docker Desktop and Docker Hub's roles in the developer workflow for modern apps. Specifically, we are investing in expanding our cloud services to enable developers to quickly discover technologies for use when building applications, to easily share these apps with teammates and the community, and to run frictionlessly on any Kubernetes endpoint, whether locally or in the cloud. So they've mentioned Docker Desktop, Docker Hub, and running on Kubernetes. Which
I just get super concerned because it sounds like public service catalog or something like that. It's just like
So
I don't know.
Other things we do know that we haven't mentioned, so I'm just going to run down this list real quick that I made. What we do know is Scott Johnston, who has been with Docker for over 5 years, he's now the new CEO. So this is the third CEO in a year, but I feel like, I mean, my personal opinion, from an outsider who doesn't work in the company, he's a great choice. We've all met him and worked with him at DockerCon and talked with him at DockerCon, so I hear nothing but good things about him. They got $35 million to go back to work on these tools, and they specifically call out Hub and Desktop. And then other information we've learned since then is anything open source is a part of Docker Inc. and not going to Mirantis. So that means SwarmKit, Docker CLI, Docker Engine, all those things are staying with Docker. Anything that's closed source, like the Docker Enterprise fork of Docker Engine, is going to Mirantis, and there's expectations that Mirantis will give back. Like they'll be committing to open source as well, but they don't, Docker, it will still be heavily influencing those open source projects. And then to answer someone else's question, there is no news on DockerCon yet. So I suspect that was not their priority on day one announcements, was to talk about a conference, 6 months from now. But I'm sure that they'll be updating us once they figure that out. So, but yeah, Docker Hub, I'm excited because I think that I agree with you, Jeff. Like a lot of people, we wanted Hub to be more awesome. Cloud started to become pretty cool. And I had customers and consulting clients that were really small shops that really only had like one part-time DevOps person using Docker Cloud when they, gave us a 2-month announcement that they were shutting it down, a 2-month notice that they were shutting it down. And that was a real shame. because it could have been the easy button. And I thought that's where we were going, was essentially originally, if anyone doesn't remember, Heroku, originally Docker was a company that was competing with Heroku for easy button app deployments, and they were making containers instead of build packs, which is kind of Heroku's way of doing things. And I feel like this is our chance to get back to that.
So I don't disagree with what Jeff was saying and what you're saying with respect to Docker Hub and the potential there. Coming from representing a lot of enterprise customers, none of those decisions that they made surprises me, because those were all decisions that were way more focused at enterprise companies that do pay for development tools. They don't want to use a public cloud SaaS service for Docker Hub. They want it on premise. They don't want anyone else touching their images. They want 17 steps for approving deployments and don't want the easy button, really. They want security tooling and all that other stuff. So that doesn't surprise me in terms of the direction in the last 3 years from where Docker was aiming. But with respect to the split, it does make sense that, or it might be an opportunity for them to not aim at enterprises anymore. However, if they do get the push to monetize or get revenue as quickly as possible, the lure of enterprise customers is probably going to come back around at some point. And that's going to be another decision moment right now in the next couple of months that we're going to be kind of looking forward to, is what the direction is and what kind of market they're trying to aim for, at least in the short term.
I think the rub there is that, like, I mean, I don't even have to work that hard to find a counterexample, like GitHub. Like, just do what GitHub did. GitHub is doing it 5 years ahead. Like, they just printed the roadmap on a nice little pamphlet and said, here's the exact order which to do things. Give us public repos, sell private repos, sell standalone GitHub. GitHub Enterprise. GitHub Enterprise is a very viable product. I know a lot of enterprises who are consuming it, right? Like, There you go, Docker Trusted Registry, and then build it out. But you launch it with the public space to get people's, because there's a lot more, you're going to encounter a lot more champions in the public space. And then those champions convert to grassroots adoption, and which is like where Docker already had that kind of thing. So I mean, enterprise has got to be on your roadmap at some point if you're selling even services. But I don't think that investing in Hub would have necessarily been orthogonal to chasing the enterprise dollar.
Fair. And I'm not saying that, there was like the best decision making. I mean, that's all post hoc at this point.
Yeah. Hindsight is 20/20, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of questions because, I've been very vocal about myself being a fan of Swarm for many years. So I thought we'd just take some time to speculate on Swarm. So this is what we do know about Swarm. SwarmKit is open source. So it, according to what we've been told, it will be still a part of Docker. It's still a part of the open source Docker engine. What Mirantis has put out is a 1-paragraph statement, and I'll just read it so I get it right. It's in the blog post. Let me just bring that up. Yeah, so we know what they're acquiring. They're acquiring all of the closed source stuff. Docker Enterprise Platform, DTR, UCP. When they say Docker CLI, I think they probably should have said Docker Enterprise CLI, because the Enterprise CLI now has custom features and custom add-ons, plugins. And then what about Docker Swarm? The primary orchestrator going forward is Kubernetes. Mirantis is committed to providing an excellent experience to all Docker Enterprise Platform customers and currently expects to support Swarm for at least 2 years, depending on customer input into the roadmap. Mirantis is also evaluating options for making the transition to Kubernetes easier for Swarm users. Now, what we do know from previous Docker cons is that Docker's, of the 750 companies that are using it, the last stat I heard was 90% are using Swarm from an executive at Docker, and that was at DockerCon. So that was a while ago, so that's probably lower now because new customers are probably coming in because of Kubernetes and not on Swarm. Old customers are probably using one or both, or maybe migrating. It's not like everyone's leaving Swarm because Docker Enterprise suddenly supports Enterprise. I think, Mike, you can speak to that. Some of us can speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, and even just looking through chat, there's a lot of people that are Swarm's easy, Swarm is good, and Swarm is great, and all this kind of stuff. And we've had a lot of good success with it here as well. So there's a lot of appeal to it due to its simpleness, and it's really approachable. So yeah.
The big thing we don't know is whether or not Docker is going to Docker Inc. will sort of reboot the Swarm team and grow it to the number of people it needs to move forward with new features like the forthcoming storage CSI support and the cron support. Those were the two things I think on the roadmap from DockerCon this year. And we don't know if that team moved to Mirantis or if they're staying at Docker. But if you're on Swarm now, I just want to put this out there. Like, you don't have to leave today. This is not an announcement that Swarm is dead, although certainly its future is continued to be in question because we're not really sure if Docker will put a lot of effort into it when they're focused on developer tooling, and do they consider Swarm developer tooling? So yeah.
I mean, I'm running it locally. I hope they do.
Yeah, so I think it's in the boundary there. I mean, Docker came out with Swarm Classic around the same time as Kubernetes was announced at DockerCon. And then they eventually integrated that into Docker. There was time when the Swarm came out, that the Swarm mode came out, that people were concerned about the bloat of the Docker engine, but they kind of solved that by splitting out Containerd and making that its own thing. So now with Kubernetes, you can run just Containerd if you don't want the full Docker engine, although most people still use the full Docker engine. So I don't know. We could speculate a lot about its future. There's tons of fans. I see new people that buy my Swarm course every day. Every day people are buying it and telling me they're implementing it. Every conference I go to and every workshop I give, whether it's on Docker, Kubernetes, or Swarm, people are talking about Swarm. So there's definitely a following, and I still haven't seen any studies that show that the percentage usage in the marketplace is dropping. That's the one thing that I keep looking for is there's statistics that obviously show that exponential growth in Kubernetes over everything else, but I haven't yet, not that there isn't, I just haven't yet seen a report showing that, like on DigitalOcean, that there aren't more deployments of Swarm than there were last year. Because to me, that's the indicator that the community's interest has waned and they're moving away from it. And I just
yeah, you're gonna have a hard time getting that stat now, though, because of all the managed Kubernetes products that are out there. So it's not like people are going to be deploying their own Kubernetes. You won't really be able to compare that apples to apples. You could certainly see whether or not it's going down, but that doesn't mean it's growing at the same rate, though, either. So I don't know. The whole thing is so weird. All I know is that when I turn on Kubernetes on my machine, my battery lasts about 15 minutes,
right.
and because I've got 18 freaking different processes and a fully safe distributed system on my single freaking CPU, and I raise the temperature in my lofted ceiling house by like 4 degrees. So like it is not appropriate for my laptop. Get it off. I can run Swarm all day and I have no problems.
Yeah.
So like if I was gonna say like, yeah, if you want to invest in developer tooling, Swarm is still super important. What I would do is instead of having a compose operator for Kubernetes, I would give me like a kube YAML interpreter to launch freaking containers on my Swarm, or something.
Or Docker Compose, like make Docker Compose use both YAML formats based on a flag, and that way you don't have to have that such a different YAML. That's a good point. Yeah, that's definitely a friction point for me with teams I'm working with is the YAML formats.
So with respect to local development, Swarm seems pretty awesome, right? If you needed to like mock out a bunch of services locally, needed to test, local chaos engineering kind of things, or distributed application architectures, or consensus, or data flows. It seems like, Swarm could be like K1S and rebranded and then just deployed locally.
K1S.
And
I don't know. I think Darren will have some words about that.
Yeah, that might be a stretch. I think he might be the person with the most informed opinion on running Kubernetes locally.
I mean, he said at DockerCon, "I'm trying to make Kubernetes as easy as Swarm." That was like a direct quote from his, and we talked about it on his show. He was on here last month, and we talked about that. You know, he loves the Swarm workflow, and even over a year ago, when I was at O'Reilly, I got like 2 minutes with Kelsey Hightower, and one of the things he agreed to was that Swarm got it right when it came to the setup, the deployment of the infrastructure, like the easy button for that. But as a lot of people like to point out, they're like, well, K3S maybe is going to solve that, and I was kind of hoping for that too. But I don't see how they're going to make easier app deployments and easier YAML management, and like they're not trying to approach that, right? They're just focused on infrastructure. So
well, you can't vary the interface, otherwise it's not Kubernetes.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's the whole rub.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to watch. I mean, going the Rancher route, where Rio goes, and hire tools that are built on top of that, and if they can bring that same UX there as well through that. So,
Rancher's always been killing it. Speaking of tweets, there's been a lot of really good tweets. I don't know if you guys follow Jeff Lindsay at all, but he had a really good, poignant tweet the other day. And I remember in 2014 when we were at the very early stages of the 2013 and 2014 where CoreOS was putting stuff out. This was pre-Swarm. This was even pre-ECS. And I mean, he put out like 3 or 4 projects that were really, really cool and some stuff that was really promising. And he had some tweet that was, in a very Jeff Lindsay way. It was just like, I still could have built something better than Kubernetes. And it was just like a very like a little bit of a jab, but like I don't see why there isn't a reason to still do so. I mean, we need a better UX, and I mean for all the technical credit to the good folks at Google. I mean, a lot of really smart people, doing a lot of really good work to put that project together. But like engineers, I mean, the engineer designing UX is like the most popular anti-pattern around, right? Like engineers are awful at UX. And what we ended up with was like a really, really, really high education burden to get started with this thing, and a very long tail to mastery. So I would have loved to see Flynn go somewhere. I would have loved more popularization around Doku or whatever it was at the time. Like that was really interesting.
Yep.
But
one comment that I did see that I'll just mention to you is, I mean, looking at the enterprise stack with DTR and UCP right now, they're very still tightly coupled to Swarm. So there's going to be a lot of work to even internally for them to get those parts of the platform to not work on Swarm. So it's going to be a decent amount of work even just to change that aspect of the enterprise platform.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, and I think about this stuff all the time, right? Like, what if the real challenge here is that Swarm's user base is largely not Go developers, which most people I talk to are not, that use it, and they're not able or interested in giving back to that. And I think one of the things for me, standing from the outside on Kubernetes, that made it so popular early on was it was a lot of infrastructure developers that were working on that project and making it the feature-laden thing that it is today that allowed everyone else to build on top of it, where Swarm never was that because its target market wasn't the people. I mean, it was both easy for developers to use, but everyone I know using it are the people that can't assimilate the Kubernetes tooling in order to do a 3-server deployment, right? So I don't. It's one of those things with Swarm. It's like if it was left up to the community, right? Let's just say it was open source completely, like it is today, and there was since there's no official enterprise support and no one's paying for it, maybe it doesn't get as much love, and maybe leaning on the community more. that's what worries me, is that whether or not it could still survive with that community and keep moving forward and adding new features, because that community isn't near as deep as, Kubernetes. That's a concern I have, I guess.
I mean, I'm a super technical, and I'm a Go developer, and I was in Docker code base from the beginning, and like their launch to Swarm mode, it was just like so even developer hostile. Like there was like eight things that happened in that summer of 2016, that spring and summer of 2016, that made the whole project so freaking hard to work with. It was like, I don't know, and it wasn't necessarily the Go part. It was like the gRPC component, like how the Swarm protocol worked and all this stuff that was just like, man, I feel bad for anybody who doesn't have the depth. I mean, I'm still not sure that I understand actually how it works today. But like the closedness of the way that the product architecture changed completely de-incentivized me from even really investing in learning it. So now, I mean, I just don't think you're going to get much community support for that product. I don't care how big it is, because at the end of the day, moving to Kubernetes is probably cheaper.
Yeah. Yeah, and so
Bret's heart.
What's that?
You're gonna break Bret's heart.
No, I mean that's the thing is, one of the things for me, and I felt comfortable about this. I was telling my wife this last night. I felt very comfortable still about committing to Swarm and talk when people. I get the question every day: should I really choose Swarm? Does it still have a future? And I keep saying, look, a majority of Docker's enterprise paying customers still use it. Like they're going to support any product that's paying the bills. But now that's not the case. It is a we'll figure it out in 2020, right? Like I think Docker will, they'll come out and they'll be either making PRs, and you'll see the team either still there or growing, because I'm not really sure if the team moved or not. I'm not sure if one of the guys in chat knows that or not. But whether or not people still are able to commit to it, I think one of the things the challenging for Kubernetes or Swarm beyond just the drivers is we're seeing things like RexRay die on the vine. And because it's just probably a lack of, like, VMware is not supporting RexRay because they probably don't need to do that anymore. And so we need to shore up some things like the storage support and stuff like that. So I think it's a little dicey right now for me to recommend it to people, because I don't want them to be stuck in a year in a place that they don't want to be in. But I mean, I still, like I said, it still runs all my stuff, and there's tons of people out there that are going to be able to use it. We know that it's going to have 2 years of fixes at least. I wouldn't expect Mirantis to be putting in new features, but Docker might still say, hey, we see this as a workflow thing, it's a developer tooling thing, and we're going to keep working on it. So we'll just see. Hopefully they'll have something official for us, because a lot of the captains talk about it. A lot of us still hope for a future in it. And maybe this will give us a renewed focus on simple tools like that, instead of having to worry so much about competing with Kubernetes. Because at the end of the day, I don't feel like they need to compete.
No, I really don't think they compete either. I think that they serve two different audiences very well. And like, I don't have any like hostility or preference one way or the other. I think that if anything, the short-sighted UX of Kubernetes creates lots of really positive consulting opportunities for the entire industry. Yeah, right. And really, really easy sales pitches for managed products in the cloud. I just wish that, like, Kubernetes is just as dead on the vine, in my opinion, as Swarm is as far as development goes. There's so many huge holes in that ecosystem that are like really, really problematic, especially as far as like implementation goes. I mean, even the managed products are barely covering what I need out of these things. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, like, I had a really like a nightmare experience with DigitalOcean earlier this year, where I just realized just how thin products in this space are. And I wish that we could get like another year of funded engineering on either of these projects before we dump all $80 billion into sales and marketing, because the products aren't finished. Like, they're not even close.
So one thing that we haven't touched upon is, I think, the Windows story and .NET workloads, which doesn't have a great story on Kubernetes. has a slightly better story on Swarm and Docker, but it was a big differentiation with respect to Docker EE in that world. And I don't think any of us are Windows subject matter experts and .NET application developers. I don't want to speak on behalf of all of us, but that's definitely like an open question now is what about the big push for running, .NET workloads and all that kind of stuff?
I'm pretty confident that VMware is going to give us a really good short-term solution to that.
Yeah.
Just schedule Windows VMs instead of containers.
Yeah. Well, and this thing's all going to go back around again, right? Like it's going to end up like with Kubernetes and all of the tooling around managing VMs and from Kubernetes, and the inception never ends.
Right.
So Mike has to jump off, actually. We can keep talking, but I feel like this is actually a good opportunity to wrap up, and then we talk about this again, like we bring up this whole new topic once Docker is able to share some more light on what their future plans are. Maybe they're going to hold on to that till DockerCon. We don't even know if there will be a DockerCon. Hopefully, we all want to be at DockerCon because that's where we all get to hang out. So we're really hoping for that. But I think the gist of this is that nothing has changed except everything's changed.
If there's no DockerCon, can we commit to all just hanging out in San Francisco in like the May-June timeframe?
Yeah. Well,
we're all together. Whoops.
We're all planning in Austin, right? So maybe we just go hang out at the Austin bars, listen to some good music, and talk about containers.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for all being on the show. Of course, we don't have all the answers, but I feel like we got through some of the big topics in chat. And I'm glad that some of the Docker staff jumped on the call and are in chat as well, because it's always interesting to see their points of view. So thanks for showing up and sharing a little bit of the stress of the last 24 hours with us. And of course, we will be back here next week, not hopefully talking about this topic as much. We'll have another guest on the show. And of course, I'm going to invite all of these gentlemen back on the show again sometime soon so we can talk about what's new at Docker, because hopefully this gets us back to new products and new tools that got us excited in the first place to jump on the Docker bandwagon. So thank you all for being here, and we'll see you next week on YouTube Live.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.